book of poems, James? You're gonna get this boring now that you have this girlfriend? Jeez, this is why friends fear when some people enter into relationships. Like, oh no, now we're getting read poetry books. Um, I don't know. We don't read much, so I don't know about reading poetry books. That might be good for some people. Um, I briefly thought about doing that, but then I deterred into actually writing things rather than reading it. Um, some of it's pretty good. Some of it I think is kind of timely when people write poetry, that it's sort of like to that time, and I think poetry is really good in an open forum like a cafe when people write it and then they read it aloud, because some forms of poetry really have to be read aloud. Like the some of the writing from the discovery group that I wrote on Facebook would have been much better read aloud, because the one I tried to describe to you in your different Facebook page, which I'm now blocked again, by the way, the same thing. They're still doing it. They still haven't learned to stop doing it. Even when you just have constant reminders to them about free speech, they still keep doing it. But, anyways, that one is definitely meant to be read aloud, because you have to have pauses and things in particularly in constant flow writing. I think some people call it something else, like a stream writing, or not consciousness writing, but something where you're just doing that, like the therapeutic writing, because it's like dependent on how it's read, what the meaning is. I tore it up, so I don't have the written form of it anymore. And my Facebook is so full that I don't even know if I'd be able to find it, because that was a while ago I posted it. But it was something like, I think, I thought I was a mother. Like, it has, you have to have like pauses in it. And you could read the same thing, like three or four different people could read it, and just how they're reading it gives it like a different meaning. That to me is how writing really should be, unless it's a novel. So some of that is probably lost in some of these like really old like poems and things, if people aren't reading them aloud. I think you sort of touched on that, like when you had the poetry book and then you were like reading it aloud. That it's sort of up to the reader or the speaker what the meaning of it's going to be, which definitely makes writing more popular, because that's, that person is getting something out of it. Um, oh, that's right, on the Tumblr, wasn't there one about rhyme time or something? That one, oh man, I wish I could access that Tumblr, because that was like wicked awesome, especially at the time. I mean, maybe I wouldn't think it was as awesome now, but at that time, that was like 2012. Just like completely in the spirit, just like, like drawing 3D noses and stuff. I can't even draw a stick figure. So that was really an awesome experience to be doing that, in writing like that. That's why people do it, because that's what they enjoy doing. And you really, if you're actually a writer, you're only happy doing that, which explains a lot of the years of unhappiness that I had in my life, because I always felt that I was not good at anything, and like just kind of was just always like sitting around and very much like into my own thoughts. But when you don't write them down, you kind of don't even realize what you're capable of in terms of creativity. And it's probably the same thing with with other art mediums where you're, a painter doesn't know he's a painter until he paints. And then it's things like that. You're not going to know that unless you're actually given that option of all these different things. Like, if you entered some sort of, I don't like the word school, where it's like all these different classes, like everyone should be in like intro to everything, at some point in their life, because you might take something and you're not going to like it, but I mean, you just realize that's not really a thing. And then you might take things that you would have never thought to take, and you just love it. Like, I guess I should have known in college when I was taking some sort of, like, I forget what the name of the course was, but it was some sort of course where you read and analyzed poems, and I love that. Actually, I absolutely love that. Um, I loved some, they used to call it English class, some of the things you did, like that type of thing where you're reading things and analyze it and getting into the characters and, things like that. That I really enjoyed. I mean, I guess I should have known. Um, but I mean, who majors in English? I mean, or philosophy, or like I didn't even know what philosophy was. Um, I've always had an interest in science too, so I really went that route. Like, I had an interest in the entertainment industry, and I more so like a director. I mean, it's not that acting wouldn't be fun. It's just that some people sort of have a gift for that and they have a face for it and they can do all the good facial expressions and stuff. And I think that because of my interest in people and psychology, that I would have been better at directing, maybe even writing dialogue rather than just being like the actor doing it. Um, but something happened where I didn't. And yeah, I wanted to do like Broadway and that type of thing. I had a really big interest in dance, but something happened to me in my upbringing that I just didn't continue doing that. Probably because I ended up with really bad body dysmorphic. And it was like I was wicked young, but it's almost like I had this sense all the time that it was too late to do something, even when I was young. Um, but anyway, so I had an interest in science too, so I sort of went that route with my college. Um, I still do. I mean, science to me is sort of like a body mechanic, like in terms of like biology type science, like anatomy and physiology. It's like if you're a mechanic, that's how I describe medicine, like the field of medicine. It's basically you're a body mechanic, and it's like really really intricate, and so it's that's sort of, I think, how it's looked at, that you sort of like know how a body runs. So, if your alternator keeps dying, your battery keeps dying, then those two things could be connected. And learning like what things cause whatever happens with engines that knock or whatever. Like, it's the same thing with a medical doctor. Um, but in terms of creativity, I think it's that I shouldn't say this because I can't think to know what makes other people happy. But I think for me, you got to have some sort of also an artistic outlet, some kind of like a thinking mind, and it's some sort of creativity just for your own happiness. Maybe that would be considered like a hobby of someone that's a psychiatrist, that that's a hobby of theirs. They're not really at the level where, or the the undying desire to keep doing that all of the time. or they don't naturally fall into it all of the time, but it's something they like to do on the side. That's sort of like their relaxing hobby that they do. Um, that type of thing. So, anyways, that's what I got from your mural. The 212. I just, at first, I thought maybe an area code, but then a poetry book popped up. So I figured that that's because I think around that time you were also trying to encourage people to read. Um, I used to love to read, but I just think at this point in my life that's just not something I'm doing. I am doing other things. And, eventually I'll get back into reading. And if I still have sort of like the brain capacity that I have now, it's going to be like really awesome. What if I, start out young and stick to that? When I was young, and they used to have like the Scholastic book thing where you could get books from the school. That was like Christmas to me. Like I remember when I was young, I just absolutely loved books and reading. And then again, as I stated, something happened. Um, I also had a lot of interest in the Bible. I'm pretty sure I was reading it. Um, so I think in terms of your children, too, getting into another topic, that um, really make sure that you're not stifling your children's, journey in life. That you're not stifling what they're doing, because I think that frequently goes on, where first of all, some parents don't even understand that they're doing that they're interrupting what their children are doing if they're becoming creative. If they want to like doodle or they're playing in the dirt, it's like a constant. Every time they're doing something, you think they're supposed to be doing something else. That can really deter children from their learning process of what they're discovering and what they want to learn and what they want to do. Um, I mean, some would propose that's a big I don't want to say proponent because I just said propose, but if you're a big proponent of laissez-faire parenting, it's sort of like that's, I'm not myself really big into creating a mini me or directing a person's, life path from day one. Um, and like over disciplinary and stuff, I'm just not into that. I'm sort of like just about relaxing and children playing and things like that. I think honestly, I mean, I guess you could, when your children are really young, try to like expose them to mentors, but I just think you should let children be children, and then, at a certain age, around puberty or something, where they begin hanging out with mentors, because they'll just have a natural interest in something that somebody else does, and then they want to be around that person and learn more. Um, there is a lot of people that have tried to restructure the school system to sort of be more like that, like these Montessori schools, unless I'm misunderstanding what that is. That it's sort of like you're not telling the child what they're going to study and learn. You're figuring out what the child has an interest in, and then you're giving to them that exposure of those interests to learn more about it. Um, that's sort of my understanding of what that is. Maybe that's not what that is, but I just figured it was. That it's a very sort of like not a set criteria for every single person. Anywho, so that's about that. I mean, that would be my guess in terms of your mural thing, and you could also be sort of like joking around because you have this girlfriend now, so you have to kind of like um, retract or whatever some of the things that you've said or done, or you're just sort of like, I'm coming off of the bachelor's list or something, and I'm like, you know um, cleaning up the past so that my girlfriend is not like, still having that around. Um, we still haven't heard that much about her, I don't think. I don't know unless there's more articles. Um, yeah, I guess someone of that age really doesn't need our input. But I mean, sometimes, not in like a negative, I should you even be going out, but just sort of like, where's your paragraph? Like if you've been courting for a while, you should be able to have some sort of a paragraph that was suggested that people do, with the person that they're with, that they write down in a paragraph, what they like about this person or why they're with this person, how this person makes them feel, that sort of thing. A paragraph's not very long. And it could be sort of an indicator that, you are like really into this person. It could be an indicator that you're not really into this person. It could be an indicator that you're not really in touch with your feelings. You don't know why you're even with this person. It's not always like a disastrous negative thing in terms of your relationship. Just maybe you're sort of like locked off a little bit, yourself. And like if you ever been able to do that with a person ever that you were with, um, that was like another big reason why I definitely knew I needed to get divorced, because I met other people and I just had sort of this like, um, change in me in terms of creativity. Like I felt like I kind of went from like a cullen existence with this man to, people that sort of view me in a different way and are, more open to like the actual me and not, some preconceived, notion of me. Um, and it was sort of like not treating me like I'm like 100 years old. I was only like in my 30s, and appreciating, how I look, and, my intelligence and wit and humor. You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised some changes that people have when they get a divorce. It can be a really miraculous, wonderful thing for a lot of people to get out of relationships that they shouldn't be in. Um, so I guess that's my thing on that. And the James stories, I was kind of like, all right, is it going to be something funny, and then we can kind of go off of that. Also, I'm sort of on Tumblr again because of the Facebook thing, so just doing joking stuff over there mostly because I'm not seeing a lot of news. I'm probably still a little bit tired from my excuse me, now I have to yawn because I said tired from my trip. Oh, one funny thing I forgot to mention in one of the other videos, when I demanded to be hospitalized so I could, sleep for the night. Um, and not because I couldn't sleep, not because I was manic or something, but I was like on the street, with nowhere to sleep, and it was actually pretty cold, and I didn't have like a winter coat or anything. But and yeah, like where's all these people that give out blankets to the homeless? I was like, so what was it? Oh, so when you see the psychiatrist, because you first, I don't know if people have done this, have a Section 12 themselves, but basically you go to the hospital. They, I don't know if they call it a Baker Act or what it's called. I know they said that term a couple of times, where, you usually have to stay 24 hours, and then, you're kind of like put in a holding cell, so you can't harm yourself because you're Section 12ing yourself. So you're basically saying that you're feeling self harm, or you're so depressed you don't want to live, you don't know what you're going to do, you've thought about suicide, that type of thing. You're feeling helpless, you're in a crisis. So, it's almost like a jail cell, like a solitary confinement jail cell, and you have to take off all of your clothes and all your jewelry and stuff. And so you're held for like usually 24 hours, and then you see the psychiatrist, the doctor, and then they examine you and they determine based on what you said and what you've done since you've been there and stuff if you need to be, held for an additional probably 2 days. I don't know if it's 72 hours after the 24 hours, or if you need to be held for 72 hours for your own safety. So anyway, the way that they did it down there is it wasn't even an actual person. It was like a video thing where you could communicate. I guess probably like a Skype. And then there's a phone where you pick up the phone and you're like talking to the person on the phone like you're a prisoner in a prison cell. It for some reason it totally reminded me of Casey Anthony when I was talking to the guy, because my hair was sort of kind of like hers was, I guess, and it was like wicked straight at the time, and just like the position of like my head and stuff, and I'm on this phone and I'm in like uh the not the scrubs, but you know what I mean, the gown or whatever, the hospital gown, and I don't know why it just reminded me of that, like I was in a prison, given like I was having a visit from the prison. I don't know, it just struck me as humorous. Maybe my humor is sometimes weird, but some people would call a hospital a prison. When I was at Bournewood, I said to them, if they let you leave during the day, you'd never leave there. That's really the only thing that I found to be bad. Or if they try to force medication on you, which I don't do that. I mean, I'm homeless. I need a home. I don't need medication. Um, when there are solutions to your reducing your stress, then you don't need medication. I mean, even the whole concept of medication in my mind is for people that don't really have a reason to be that anxious and be that stressed out and to be that helpless. Okay, and then they just have that and they don't know why they have it, um, because they're probably holding on to past things that they haven't sorted out through counseling and God and life steps, or and they don't have the capacity to be able to get themselves out of it. Like they have the ability, they have the means to get themselves out of a situation, but they don't know how to. Or they're locked into this thinking process where they refuse to make the correct decisions to get themselves out of it. Whereas hopefully it's being proved time and time again in my situation that I've attempted several, times to improve my situation, and I'm being, turned away. I'm having doors shut in my face, and I'm not getting what I need. It's not that I'm sort of incompetent or whatever the term would be. It's just that what I actually need, it will not be given to me. So that becomes frustrating in terms of why didn't you do this and that? Why aren't you changing your lifestyle? Why aren't you moving? Why aren't you getting a divorce? Um, it's basically comes down to this work thing, which I don't find work to actually be the solution to every life problem. And I'm trying to do something which requires me not to work. So that's why. And I wasn't working before. I've never been big on work. Work to me is sort of like something that I do when I feel that I need to be accepted into a society. That's why I work. Um, yes, sometimes you do mentally feel better when you're working, but what happens to me is it becomes sort of like too much and I can't keep doing it. Like I'll enjoy it for a time and then I don't enjoy it anymore. And because it's not really what I was created to do. And I've also never in my life, aside from maybe when I was in college and had my own room, I've never in my life um, had my own place. Like I've never been able to control my living environment. Um, I did semi in my house with my children. I could control my living environment, but I couldn't get rid of the man that was living with me. And then when I did get rid of the man that was living to me, he went on an all-out war to take away my living environment and take that ability away from me. Um, so that is pretty much the gist of my stress. And I've explained this when I was in Boardwood that I believe in sort of like, as you call it, like a Zen atmosphere, that that's what I sort of require to have optimal happiness in my life and optimal mental health. And it doesn't mean that I have to live in a mansion or on the beach or something, but it's like, yeah, those things definitely help. And being in Florida with the sunshine definitely helps, in the warmth, um, in the blue skies, and the ocean. The ocean is definitely a thing I like. But if I can't control my living environment, and there's a lot of chaos or whatever around me, it's very detrimental to my mental health. And that leads to harming my physical health, as a lot of people are having happen to them, where I've been told by just many people about their high blood pressures and their anxiety and stuff. And it's because they cannot control their lives, whether that's something within themselves or it's the system. Now, if you're working and you can't control your life, then that's another issue, where you're not able to make those decisions for yourself and be active as to getting out of things you don't want to be in, and making yourself a priority over those things, and not using those things as excuses to stay locked into a dysfunction because that feels comfortable and safe, and change feels scary. Um, People that have no income and people that are homeless can't control that. So, in terms of homeless people seeming, sort of like extra angry or mean, or they smell like pee, unless you've sort of like lived that for any amount of time to understand that type of frustration and helplessness and hopelessness, um, you're not getting really an understanding of that. You're not understanding where that's coming from, and you're not understanding that that could be the most sane person and has just had all of these things happen to them that they're not actually controlling. Not everyone that's homeless put themselves there. Sometimes they're put there by other people, and they're put there by the world system. So I think that more interaction with people that you assume are homeless, and talking to them and finding out, just talking to them. Like everything doesn't have to be like you're a do-gooder on a mission. It's just sort of like you're trying to get an understanding of how this happens, and going from there, so that you're not just every time someone comes into your facility, for instance, assuming things about them, because I'm pretty sure that's going on based on some people's reactions to me, that they're assuming all of these things without actually finding out what's going on, and are we doing that with other people. Um, I myself, I still do it, but I don't speak it. I don't speak it. I let it go in my mind, and then I kind of like to ruminate it and remind and be reminded about. One thing is, if you catch yourself all the time saying, okay, well, they must be remembering that wrong, or they must something happened they don't want to admit, or things like that. There's some sort of like underlying that they're not telling me, or something like that. If you're catching yourself doing that a lot, then you need to find out more about all of these people's injustice stories, because you can have people that are just mentally confused and can't actually understand how they are contributing to their problem. But then you can also have people that it did have very strange injustice happen to them. So I don't know. Maybe maybe that wasn't even in that psychiatrist's mind. He just wanted to know. He pretty much, did he catch the gist? Did he assume that I just did it on purpose so I had a place to sleep? I think I did, but the things that I was saying at the intake were not lies. That was the truth of how I felt at that time, and that I was absolutely honest about. I generally do not feel a state of depression. I generally do not feel suicidal. I generally do not feel like, I want to die in terms of like committing suicide. Um, my entire thing at that time was I was in a crisis because I was put up against a wall as to what am I going to do, and just completely just helpless there. And if I was housed and unfortunately stipend because the system isn't gone, I wouldn't have those emotions at all. I'd be joyous as I used to be. Yes, I love my children very much, and obviously my life would have been more enhanced by having them around me. But I don't feel at this point that that's the entire gist of my problem. I think that it's because of being homeless, and I'm still, even though I had to give up my home and my children and all of that, all of the material things that I was allotted when I was married, I'm still not allowed to live. And no one should be having that going on. No one should be having that going on. In my opinion, if we're going to keep the system going, then every single person that applies for this stipend should just get it immediately. Okay, and then societal pressures, if the person is working or the person's doing drugs and this and that or whatever. I mean, they've taken my blood and my urine several times. It's documented over at least a few years that I'm clearly not using, and I don't show any signs of using anything. um, so in terms of that, unfortunately, you do occasionally lose lives because people choose to take that money and use it to kill themselves with drugs. But that's when you kind of get into some of that's their choice, because if you're given the things that you said that you needed, like the housing and the stipend, okay, and then you don't do the program and you're still having all these problems and you won't seek out other help, then you can't go on a guilt binge yourself that you shouldn't have given the person the money. I mean, what would you have done with these people? Just leave them to rot in the street? Because what they do, if they're that degree of not facing their emotional problems to get over their using, okay, they would still panhandle and stuff for the money or steal or get involved in prostitution and things like that. So I still don't feel that it's the housing and the stipend that's fueling that. Um, that sort of, I went off into a thing, but I think in terms of testimony per the homeless, I do see both sides of that. In terms of, well, why would you give them money? They're just going to do this and that, and it's like, how are they going to live? That's supposed to be why you have certain things set up. There's not even like a piece of land for people to go to live free. And then you can sort of say, well, we don't have to give you any money. It's like, what are you talking about? You don't have to give me any money. How would I live here? You don't have a free hotel. In Orlando, you don't even have a free shelter. Okay, and there are problems with the shelters, and that's because the people that are trying to run them are not being given the proper environment, and you don't have people that actually that's their calling in life to do that. You don't have that. So it's in there's different people that need to be in different types of shelters, and that's not really being kind of sorted out. um, it, it, it becomes sort of, you do sort of begin to be like, because ultimately the answer is to free everybody and just cut the quit with even the shelters. As stated before, after the election, day one, release the housing. Okay, housing is not just a homeless shelter. There's empty houses, there's hotel rooms, there's condos, there's tracts of land that some people actually could live on because they're hardy, and they camp and they cook out there. I mean, all they would need is a water source and some way to obtain food. And if they're in an area where they can actually begin growing, some people will live out in these camps like that if they're allowed to. Okay, so it does become sort of like if you find yourself going, I'm all over the place, and because it's like the ultimate sort of answer that we're, in my opinion, that we're all being directed to get to. Once you start thinking about it, you realize that that is the only answer. That is the only ultimate answer as how to fix this. Say you're just talking about homelessness. That is the ultimate answer of how to fix this, is you have to give up some land for people to live on. And then you've got to give up stipends. And this thing with the traffic interruptions and stuff, I'm not negating that. Okay, that it's not that that's a waste of time and people shouldn't be doing it, even if one person starts thinking that they need to drive less, because people are obviously, it's not crazy, people are trying to get you to stop driving. I'm not negating that, okay? But if everybody stopped working because they knew they could collect a check, there's not going to be any more cars. That instantly solves the problem, okay? So we did the thing with the everyone gets the food snap, and someone's going to report to us, if they can, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Tumblr, any of those things. You're being interviewed by some sort of a TV station, anything like that, okay? It indicate to us that that's not happening, that you're still being denied food snap for any reason, anything at all. I mean, I'm at the point where even if you're working and you have an income, that if you're making $1 million a year and you go down to the DTA office, you should be getting a SNAP card, okay? It should just be no questions asked. And the peer counselor with, well, I could just go down there and get $92. Great. I think everyone should go down to Social Security and get a Social Security check. Okay? And then it's like an actual choice decision if you want to work. Then you're actually getting to some sort of liberty where you decided that you wanted extra money. Now, I know some people are sort of like, I said it too, I don't approve of it. I don't approve of it, okay? If you're doing that and working, but you're choosing to work. So then, if everyone did that, we got into a thing where we knew that everyone that was working is basically admitting to all of us that they want to have extra, extra, extra. That's a good sort of way to get into the psychology of this entire thing. Hopefully that makes sense and it wasn't just like too much at once. It's sort of like the equality question. How do you find out if people are having an issue with equality or they're actually afraid of losing their house and being homeless? Okay? I think that that would be something that I would definitely continue to recommend take place. And that eliminates all of these problems with all of these hearings and this and this and that. That just everyone who applies, and it should be the same amount. I know they don't do that either. Everything's got to be complicated, where it's just everybody gets this amount. It just anyone who applies gets it, because I think that's how it used to be. Because you could have argued years ago that people actually were choosing to work because they wanted this American dream where they could be above someone else and have all of these things. So I think if you really wanted to find out if if you're free, is question yourself why that wouldn't happen, why we would even be having this ever increasing difficulty process to get a check that in the past people wouldn't want to do. They didn't want a handout, they didn't want to live on the welfare, they didn't want to live on that little amount of money, etc., etc., etc. Where now you're sort of starting to realize, wait a minute, why wouldn't they just give everybody this money? If we are making, such and such money a year by working, why wouldn't they want to give everybody this low amount of money who just asked and said, I'm not going to work? Okay? So maybe James will go over that in some of his courses that he teaches. That would be fantastic. And maybe Russell could appear on the television again, and going over how your system even wouldn't immediately collapse if you just agreed to get rid of a monetary system, because you already have everything going. And if you actually wanted to do the job that you're doing, you'd keep doing it whether you were paid or not. Okay? these are really good, are you truly happy questions, and just getting you to think about things, okay? Thanks.